Hey guys, tonight we dive into one of the most terrifying transformations in human history, the rise of a failed artist who almost conquered the world. You know his name. You've seen his face on dusty history covers and black and white documentaries. But tonight, you'll see what really turned him from an ordinary man into a monster that reshaped the 20th century. It all begins in silence, a broken land, a lost generation, and a single voice waiting to be heard. And don't worry, you probably won't survive this one awake. Not because it's boring, but because the way this story seeps into your mind feels strangely hypnotic. It's the kind of story that makes you realize how fragile civilization really is. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and your local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself wandering through the ruins of Germany in 1918. The air smells of rust and coal smoke. Soldiers limp home on crutches, their uniforms torn, their eyes empty. Posters shout, "We surrendered," and "Germany blamed for the war." Echoes of a nation's humiliation. You glance around and realize you're walking through a country that has just lost World War I. The proud German Empire, the one that dreamed of domination, has collapsed. The Kaiser has fled. The economy is in tatters. Bread costs more than a day's wages, and people trade furniture for food. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, seals Germany's fate. The Allied powers, Britain, France, the US, force Germany to accept full responsibility for the war. They demand enormous reparations, billions of marks, impossible to pay. German territories are taken away, the army is limited, pride is shattered. You can almost feel that bitterness crawling under people's skin. Ordinary citizens feel cheated, betrayed, humiliated. They whisper, "We didn't lose the war on the battlefield, we were stabbed in the back." This stab-in-the-back myth, blaming Jews, communists, and liberals for Germany's defeat, starts spreading like wildfire. And somewhere in the crowd, a man with a narrow mustache listens carefully. Adolf Hitler, a 29-year-old Austrian who had served as a soldier, walks among the same hungry faces. He's lost, directionless, and furious. The war was the only place he felt he mattered. Now that's gone. You imagine him sitting in a corner of a cheap Munich hostel, clutching his army coat, muttering about betrayal, about how someone ruined Germany. That anger finds its shape soon. But first, picture the country's state. Political chaos, riots, assassinations, hyperinflation so insane that people burn banknotes for heat. A loaf of bread that cost 1 mark before the war now costs millions. Children play with stacks of worthless money. The middle class disappears overnight. And this is where you see it, that dangerous mixture, humiliation, hunger, and hope for revenge. It's like dry grass waiting for a spark. That spark? It will be him. For now, though, Hitler isn't famous. He's just another unemployed veteran. He drifts through Munich, a city bubbling with political experiments, where communists take over for a few days, then nationalists fight back. It's a madhouse of ideology and desperation. One day in 1919, he's assigned by the army to spy on a tiny fringe group called the German Workers' Party. He walks in expecting a joke, but the moment he hears them talk about German pride and hatred for the Treaty of Versailles, something clicks inside him. He stands up and argues so passionately that the small group asks him to join. You might smile at the irony. The man sent to spy on extremists becomes one of them. But this moment is the seed of everything that's to come. At this point, Hitler's not a dictator, just a failed artist, a loud mouth, and a man nursing his anger. But he has something rare: he can speak. He can hold a crowd. His words cut deep, simple, emotional, and furious. When he talks, people listen. They cheer. They cry. They feel hope again. You picture one of his first speeches, dimly lit beer halls filled with smoke, men shouting Germany will rise again. The clink of mugs, the thunder of applause. It's intoxicating. And that's how it starts. He learns quickly that words can move nations, that fear can unite people faster than love ever could. One historian later wrote that Hitler was not born evil. He was made by a wounded nation. Scholars still argue whether it was his personal trauma or Germany's collective pain that gave birth to him, but either way they fit perfectly like a key in a lock. By 1920, the German Workers' Party renames itself the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or as you'll soon hear it called, the Nazi Party. Their red flag with a white circle and a black swastika becomes a new symbol of rebirth. You can feel the shift. From brokenness to fury. From despair to dangerous pride. And as you drift through those years, The smoky meetings, the angry marches, the sound of boots on cobblestones, you sense something growing, something that the world isn't ready for. What began as one man's bitterness is turning into a movement. And that movement, as you'll soon see, will take Germany and the world somewhere darker than anyone could have imagined. You drift further into post-war Munich, where everything smells of wet bricks, stale beer, and unrest. The noise never stops. Political rallies, marching bands, men in worn uniforms shouting about saving Germany. It's chaos disguised as patriotism. And in the middle of it all, you see him again, Adolf Hitler, no longer just another face in the crowd. He's standing on a small wooden stage in a beer hall, speaking to maybe 50 people. His voice trembles at first but then grows stronger, angry, hypnotic. Germany was betrayed, he shouts. The crowd murmurs. We are not the losers, we are the victims, he thunders, and the murmuring turns to applause. You watch his eyes flicker. This is the moment he realizes his words can control people. But let's rewind for a moment. Before all this, he was nothing more than a wandering Austrian with failed dreams. Born in 1889 in Braunau am Inn, a small town on the border between Austria and Germany, young Adolf grew up in a strict household. His father, Alois, was a customs officer who demanded obedience. His mother, Clara, was gentle but overprotective. Hitler adored her. Her death from breast cancer in 1907 shattered him. He moved to Vienna, dreaming of becoming an artist. Twice he applied to the Academy of Fine Arts and twice he was rejected. Imagine that, 2 letters that could have changed the world if they'd simply said yes. Instead, he ended up living in cheap hostels, selling postcards, and spending hours reading about German nationalism and racial purity. He admired the idea of a strong Germany, even though he wasn't German by birth. He learned about politics from newspapers and street debates, and he noticed how people used fear to control the masses. Later he'd perfect that art. When World War I broke out in 1914, he volunteered to fight for Germany, not Austria. He served as a messenger on the front lines, surviving near-death experiences and earning medals for bravery. For him, the war gave meaning, discipline, purpose, brotherhood. But when it ended in defeat, that purpose collapsed. Millions died, and yet it felt like nothing changed. When he heard Germany had surrendered, he said it felt like a dagger in the heart. That phrase would define his obsession for the rest of his life. Back in Munich, he clung to the only thing he knew, the army. The chaos after the war terrified the military elites. Germany was filled with revolutionary groups, communists, monarchists, anarchists. To monitor them, the army sent informants to political meetings. That's how Hitler first walked into the German Workers' Party. It was a small, unimpressive group led by Anton Drexler, a railway mechanic. Their discussions were angry but chaotic. Nationalism mixed with anti-Semitism and resentment toward capitalism. But Hitler saw potential. He had something they didn't, the ability to channel all that rage into a single, coherent story. He didn't just speak, he performed. His body stiffened, his voice cracked with emotion, his gestures sliced through the air. People described his speeches as electric. He made the audience feel like victims who could still become heroes. It's strange to think, charisma, not cruelty, is what first made him rise. By 1920, the party was growing. They decided to rename it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP. Hitler helped design the new symbol, a swastika inside a white circle on a red flag. He said it represented the struggle of the Aryan man. The irony? The swastika was originally an ancient symbol of peace and good fortune. He turned it into a mark of hatred. And here's the quirky part. Historians found that Hitler was so obsessed with stagecraft that he choreographed his entrances like theater. Before a big speech, he'd make his audience wait in silence, letting tension build until he appeared suddenly, lit from below, creating an almost mystical effect. Scholars still argue whether he learned this from church rituals or from watching silent films, but either way it worked. People didn't just listen, they believed. You walk through Munich's beer halls again, hearing his voice echo over the clinking of glasses. You can almost see it, men nodding, clapping, shouting Heil, for the first time. He preached that Germany could rise again, but only if it cleansed itself of its enemies. He promised work, pride, unity, things the broken nation craved. It was intoxicating, a new religion built around pain and revenge. And he wasn't alone. Men like Ernst Röhm, a soldier with influence, began organizing paramilitary groups called the SA or Brown Shirts. They wore uniforms, marched in streets, and fought communists in violent brawls. To ordinary people they looked like order returning to chaos. But beneath that order, something sinister was forming. By 1921, Hitler had taken full control of the Nazi Party. Drexler, the founder, quietly faded away. Now Hitler was the face, the voice, the absolute authority. He demanded loyalty, obedience, and devotion. You realize it's not just a political party anymore, it's a movement built around one man. And that man is starting to believe his own myth. He's no longer the failed painter or the drifting soldier. He's the savior of Germany, or so he tells himself. You can almost hear him whispering to the mirror, testing the words, one people, one nation, one leader. The story you're in is still small, but you can feel it stretching its wings. The anger of millions is now taking form, and soon that form will demand blood, loyalty, and absolute power. But for now, you step back into the smoky beer hall, watching him finish his speech. The crowd roars. Beer splashes. Someone hands him a bouquet of flowers. And you realize, chillingly, that what began as words will soon turn into weapons. You find yourself standing again in that Munich beer hall, the wooden tables sticky with spilled beer and cigarette ash. The air is heavy, thick, alive with noise. You can feel it, something electric in the crowd, something dangerous. You lean against the wall as Hitler finishes speaking, his voice rising and falling like music. His eyes burn with certainty, and the people around you stare at him as if he's already leading the country. That's when you realize he's found his rhythm. This is the moment when the spark of nationalism bursts into flame. The year is 1922, and Germany is suffocating under inflation, humiliation, and political division. Every week brings a new crisis, a new headline about foreign powers demanding payment or local uprisings tearing cities apart. Ordinary citizens are losing faith in democracy, because what good is voting when your salary can't even buy bread? You watch men in ragged coats march through the streets waving red flags, shouting slogans for revolution. Communists want to turn Germany into another Soviet Russia. The rich fear them. The poor envy them. The army hates them. And Hitler, he uses that chaos like a conductor uses an orchestra. He takes the fear of communism and mixes it with anger at the Treaty of Versailles. He adds a hint of revenge, a dose of false hope, and serves it to the public like medicine. It works. In small towns, people start whispering his name. He's the man who says what others are afraid to say. He's the man who dares to promise that Germany can rise again. You walk through the city one night and see his posters. Bold fonts, dramatic slogans, red swastika banners glowing under lamplight. The propaganda looks almost hypnotic. One people, one nation, one leader. You notice how every word seems to stroke people's pride. By now, Hitler has formed the SA, the Sturmabteilung or Storm Detachment. They wear brown uniforms and armbands. They protect Nazi meetings and attack their rivals. To the public, they seem like disciplined soldiers keeping order. In truth, they're violent thugs trained to crush anyone who disagrees. Scholars still argue whether Hitler planned this militarization from the start, or if it simply grew from the street fights of the era. But you can see the pattern forming. Intimidation as politics, fear as persuasion. The SA march in perfect formation through the streets, drums pounding, boots striking in rhythm. You can almost hear the echo, thud, 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 a heartbeat of fanaticism. Children cheer. Shopkeepers salute. Old soldiers cry with pride. For the first time in years, Germany feels united, even if it's around hate. And there's something else. Hitler's speeches are evolving. He's no longer just blaming the Allies, he's defining an enemy within. He talks about the Jew, the Marxist, the traitor. He uses they so often that it becomes a shadow in every German's mind, a faceless enemy responsible for every problem. It's powerful psychology. You realize you've seen this trick before, the simplification of evil. It's always easier to hate one group than to understand complex systems. And Hitler masters it completely. One night, you slip into another hall, this one larger, hundreds of people, banners, spotlights. He's in the center, wearing a tailored brown jacket, his posture rigid. He waits in silence before speaking, just long enough to make the audience lean forward. Then he begins softly, almost calmly. He talks about struggle, destiny, pride. His voice grows louder, harsher, urgent. By the end, he's shouting, veins visible, sweat dripping, hands clenched like a preacher possessed. The crowd erupts in chants, Heil. Heil. You feel your skin crawl. You realize it's not just a speech, it's a ritual. Hitler isn't offering logic, he's offering belonging. He tells every listener, you matter. You are part of something bigger. And for a people beaten down by war and poverty, that promise is irresistible. Behind the scenes, the Nazi Party is expanding fast. They're printing newspapers, distributing flyers, organizing youth groups, and hosting rallies across Bavaria. The money comes from sympathetic businessmen who fear communism more than fascism. The Catholic Church stays silent. The police look away. By 1923, the party has tens of thousands of members. And Hitler? He believes it's time. Germany's economy is collapsing again. The government prints more money to pay war reparations, causing prices to explode. People carry wages in wheelbarrows, and by evening, those same wages can't buy a loaf of bread. It's the perfect storm. You walk through a marketplace. One egg costs 80 billion marks. Children play with banknotes like confetti. Desperation is everywhere. And in the middle of it, Hitler decides, now is the time to seize power. He looks to Benito Mussolini, who just marched on Rome and made himself dictator of Italy. If Mussolini can do it, why can't he? So he gathers his followers, Rome, Goering, Ludendorff, and plans a coup. They'll storm the local government, capture the leaders, and march to Berlin. He calls it a national revolution. You can almost see the scene unfolding. Armed men shouting, flags raised high, confidence blazing. But destiny for now has other plans. The coup will fail. That night, as Hitler paces his room rehearsing his speech for the uprising, you feel the story trembling on the edge of disaster and fame. He doesn't know it yet, but the coming failure, the beer hall putsch, will destroy him publicly, only to make him immortal politically. For now, he sleeps in that rented room in Munich, dreaming of power, of redemption, of the cheering millions that don't yet exist. And you can't help but wonder, if someone had stopped him then, if that speech had never happened, would the world have been spared everything that followed? You wake up in a cold Munich morning, November 1923. The city feels tense, like it's holding its breath. Rumors drift through the cobblestone streets. Something big is about to happen. You follow the sound of marching boots and drunken songs until you reach a crowded beer hall, the Berger Braukeller. Inside, hundreds of men fill the hall, shouting, drinking, laughing nervously. On the stage stands Gustav von Kahr, Bavaria's state commissioner, giving a speech about stability and unity. But the door bursts open, the crowd gasps, and there he is, Adolf Hitler. He strides in with armed men from the SA, pistols drawn, eyes blazing. Behind him is Ernst Röhm, and among the men in uniform, you notice the unmistakable face of a war hero, General Erich Ludendorff, one of Germany's most famous soldiers from World War I. Hitler fires a shot into the ceiling. The noise silences everything. The national revolution has begun, he shouts. Panic spreads. Some men duck, others freeze. He climbs onto a chair and declares that the current government is overthrown. He points his gun at the Bavarian officials and says, "You are all under arrest." And you realize, this is it. The beer hall putsch. The first major attempt to overthrow the Weimar Republic. The crowd doesn't know what to do, cheer or flee. Some cheer out of fear, others out of hope. Outside, SA troops seize buildings, control intersections, block the police. But it's chaos. Poor planning, bad communication. No real army support. You walk among them and sense confusion. They think they're making history, but history is about to crush them. Kahr and the others are forced to swear loyalty at gunpoint, promising to support Hitler's movement. For a few hours, it looks like the coup might actually succeed. But as night falls, those same officials escape and alert the police and army. By morning, government forces are ready. On November 9, 1923, Hitler and about 2,000 supporters march toward Munich city center, flags waving, hoping to inspire a national uprising. But at Odeonsplatz, they're met by armed police. You can hear the tension in the air, marching boots, rifles clicking, shouts echoing off stone buildings. Then, gunfire. It lasts barely a minute. 14 Nazis are killed, 4 police officers fall, and the rest scatter. Hitler is thrown to the ground. His bodyguard, Ulrich Graf, takes a bullet for him. In the chaos, Hitler dislocates his shoulder and flees. By evening he's arrested. The coup is over. The revolution lasted less than 24 hours. You walk through the streets afterward, empty, silent, blood on the cobblestones. The posters are torn down, the swastika banners trampled in the mud. Feels like the end. But you know better. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because history has a cruel sense of humor. The failed coup that should have buried Hitler instead makes him famous. At his trial, instead of denying anything, he uses the courtroom as a stage. He admits everything proudly, calling himself a patriot who only wanted to save Germany. His speeches are reprinted in newspapers, and the judge, sympathetic to his nationalist cause, allows it. "I alone bear responsibility," Hitler declares. "But I am not a criminal, I am a German who loves his country." The audience applauds. Imagine that, applause for treason. He's sentenced to 5 years in Landsberg prison, but he'll serve only 9 months. It's more like a retreat than a cell, a spacious room, visitors allowed, time to read and write. And that's exactly what he does. There, in that quiet prison, he begins dictating his thoughts to his loyal secretary Rudolf Hess. The result is a book that will poison the next generation, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. You can almost see him writing, pacing, ranting, describing his vision of the future. He blames Jews for everything, Germany's loss, moral decay, capitalism, communism, contradictions that don't matter to him or his followers. He writes about Lebensraum, the idea that Germans need living space in Eastern Europe. He dreams of a purified race, a dictatorship of willpower, and a world remade under one leader, himself. It's horrifying, yet he believes every word. At first, the book doesn't sell much. People call it rambling, repetitive. But later, when Hitler's fame grows, Mein Kampf becomes a Nazi Bible, required reading for every loyal follower. Scholars still argue whether he truly understood what he was writing or if it was just emotional revenge. But history proved one thing: he meant every word. While in prison, he realizes something profound: he doesn't need to seize power by force. He can take it legally by manipulating democracy itself. And when he's released in December 1924, he's more dangerous than ever. You watch him walk out of the prison gates, thinner, calmer, but his eyes are sharper. He knows what he wants now. He'll rebuild the Nazi Party not with guns, but with words, votes, and propaganda. It's chilling, you can almost hear his thoughts whispering in your ear. Next time they'll invite me in. As you leave Landsberg prison behind, the snow begins to fall. Germany, exhausted by chaos, still believes the nightmare is over. But you know the truth, it's only sleeping. You follow him out of the prison gates that cold December morning in 1924. His step is slower, but his gaze is still burning, quiet, focused, patient. Hitler has learned one critical lesson: you can't grab Germany by the throat, you must seduce it. He returns to Munich, but things have changed. The Nazi Party, banned after the beer hall putsch, is broken, scattered. Most members have moved on, chasing new causes or ordinary jobs. For a while, nobody even wants to hear his name. But Hitler's no longer the reckless revolutionary shouting in beer halls. He's now a strategist. He starts rebuilding his party from the ground up, legally this time. He tells his followers, "We will hold power not by force but through the ballot." You watch him reinvent everything. The brown shirt SA is restructured into a disciplined street army. He creates new propaganda units, youth groups, even women's organizations, all designed to spread the Nazi message into every layer of German society. And his greatest weapon? Words. Hitler begins touring again, speaking to small halls, then larger ones, then stadiums. His speeches are emotional storms, furious, theatrical, hypnotic. You see him pause mid-sentence, eyes closed, then explode into shouting fury, his voice breaking through the silence like thunder. He talks about national pride, humiliation, betrayal. He paints a picture of a Germany that was once great and could be great again, if only it had a strong leader to guide it. People start listening. He doesn't just rant about revenge anymore, he promises hope. You move through the crowds, men in ragged coats, widows clutching their last coins, soldiers begging for work. Inflation had destroyed savings. Unemployment had crushed dignity. They're desperate for someone to blame, and someone to follow. Hitler gives them both. He points his finger outward, to the Treaty of Versailles, to the foreign powers, and especially to Germany's Jewish population, painting them as invisible enemies within. You can almost hear the whisper spread from person to person: maybe he's right. Meanwhile, the Weimar Republic struggles to hold itself together. The government changes hands constantly. Coalitions collapse. Presidents and chancellors come and go like guests in a haunted house. In this chaos, the Nazi Party starts to grow quietly, brick by brick. By 1928, they win just 2.6% of the vote, still small but no longer irrelevant. But then, history offers Hitler another gift. In 1929, the Great Depression hits. The New York Stock Exchange collapses, and the shockwave smashes across the world. In Germany, factories close, banks fail, millions lose their jobs overnight. Families stand in bread lines that stretch around corners. Children go hungry. You can feel the air thicken: fear, anger, humiliation. This is exactly the soil in which extremism grows. The Nazi Party becomes the voice of that rage. Their posters scream promises: work and bread. Germany awake. End the shame of Versailles. Hitler's speeches hit harder now. His face appears on pamphlets, banners, newspapers. His once tiny rallies turn into roaring oceans of followers. By 1930, the Nazis leap from 12 seats in parliament to 107, the second largest party in Germany. You stand in a rally hall, watching him speak from the stage under blazing lights. Behind him, the swastika banners ripple like blood-red waves. The crowd chants in perfect rhythm. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one empire, one leader. It's mesmerizing. You can almost feel the pulse of a nation surrendering to a voice. He's careful now, presenting himself as a man of discipline, not violence. The failed coup is buried under a new image. Adolf Hitler, the patriot, the savior, the man who can restore Germany's soul. Even many conservatives and industrialists begin to take interest. Maybe, they whisper, we can control him. But you know better. No one controls a storm. By 1932, the Nazi Party becomes the largest political force in Germany. Yet, ironically, Hitler still doesn't hold any official power. The president, Paul von Hindenburg, an aging war hero, dislikes him, calls him that bohemian corporal. But the system is collapsing. Political deadlock, street violence between Nazis and communists, and mass unemployment are tearing the country apart. The pressure builds until finally, behind closed doors, conservative elites make a fateful decision. If we can't stop him, we'll use him. They believe they can make him chancellor, keep him under control, and restore order through his popularity. It's a deal with the devil, and the devil smiles. You can almost hear the click of destiny locking into place. By January 1933, after years of failure, propaganda, and manipulation, Hitler's dream is finally within reach. The man who once tried to seize power by force is now being invited into it. You exhale slowly, feeling the weight of inevitability. He learned to speak softly, wear a suit, and shake hands, but underneath, the fire never went out. And as the snow melts over Germany, the world is about to change forever. It's a gray morning, January 30th, 1933. You stand among a sea of people gathered outside the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. The air bites cold, but there's a strange electricity running through the crowd. Then it happens. A black car pulls up, flashes pop, and the door opens. Adolf Hitler steps out, wearing a dark coat and a calm smile. He's no longer the agitator screaming in beer halls, he's the Chancellor of Germany. You can almost hear the irony echoing through time. A man who once tried to destroy democracy has just been handed its highest office, legally. Inside the building, President Paul von Hindenburg sits stiffly, signing the appointment papers with shaky hands. He's 85, tired, and convinced that his advisors, men like Franz von Papen, have made a clever political move. Don't worry, they tell him. We'll box Hitler in. We'll keep him under control. You can almost laugh. They've just given a match to a man who dreams of fire. That night, thousands of people march through Berlin holding torches, chanting Heil Hitler. The flames flicker against old buildings, reflecting in the windows like a warning written in light. The city doesn't know it yet, but this is the night democracy begins to die. For the first few weeks, everything looks almost normal. Cabinet meetings, polite smiles, press conferences, the illusion of order. But behind the scenes, Hitler and his loyal inner circle, Göring, Goebbels, Himmler, move fast. They start reshaping the government in silence. Their goal is simple, total power. And they won't wait long. Just 4 weeks later, on February 27, 1933, the unthinkable happens. You're walking near the Reichstag, the German parliament building, when suddenly the sky turns orange. Smoke, shouts, sirens, the building is burning. The Reichstag fire. A lone Dutch communist, Marinus van der Lubbe, is found at the scene. But was he acting alone? Scholars still argue whether the Nazis themselves staged the fire as a pretext. What's certain is that Hitler wastes no time using it. That very night, he convinces President Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag fire decree, suspending civil liberties, free speech, free press, privacy, even the right to trial. You feel it, the world tilts. Overnight, the democratic state becomes a police state. SA and SS men storm through neighborhoods, kicking down doors, arresting communists, socialists, journalists, anyone who might oppose them. Thousands are dragged into makeshift prisons. Fear spreads like smoke. Then, just a month later, comes the Enabling Act, the law that changes everything. Hitler pushes it through the parliament, claiming it's necessary to restore national stability. Surrounded by armed guards, most deputies vote in favor. Only the Social Democrats stand against it. With that single vote, the Reichstag essentially dissolves its own power, giving Hitler the right to make laws without parliament, even to override the constitution. You can almost hear the echo of the gavel hitting the desk. Germany has just voted away its freedom. Hitler doesn't waste a second. Political parties are banned. Trade unions are dissolved. Judges swear loyalty not to the law but to him personally. Propaganda floods every corner of life. Posters, films, schoolbooks, newspapers, all singing the same tune. One people, one Reich, one Führer. Children salute in classrooms. Radio speeches start and end with Heil Hitler. Even neighbors begin watching each other, reporting any un-German behavior. It's terrifying how quickly ordinary people adapt to fear. And then, in 1934, another critical moment. One that proves there's room for only one master in this new empire. Inside his own movement, tension brews. The SA, led by Ernst Röhm, has grown too powerful. Over 2 million men loyal not to the state but to Röhm himself. He dreams of replacing the regular army with his stormtroopers. The generals don't like that. Neither does Hitler. So, in late June 1934, you follow him to a secluded resort near Munich, the night of the long knives. Hitler personally leads the purge. Röhm and dozens of others are arrested, accused of treason, and executed without trial. Within 3 days, more than 100 people are dead. Old rivals, political threats, even conservatives who once supported him. By July, the army swears loyalty to Hitler himself. And when President Hindenburg dies just a month later, Hitler merges both offices, Chancellor and President, declaring himself Führer. You can feel the silence settle over Germany. The Republic is gone. The dictatorship is complete. From a failed revolutionary to the ruler of an entire nation, in just 10 years. And somewhere in that eerie calm, a whisper passes through history. This is how freedom ends. Not with chaos, but with applause. You stand in Berlin, 1934, watching banners rise like blood-red curtains over the city. Swastikas flutter from every building. Marching bands echo down the avenues, and the radio hums with a single, unbroken voice. Adolf Hitler's Germany has begun. Everywhere you look, the transformation is total. Within months, the Nazis have taken control of everything. The government, the police, the press, the schools, even art and science. It's not just politics anymore. It's indoctrination. You see it in the classrooms. Children recite the Führer's name instead of morning prayers. Textbooks teach racial science, showing diagrams that rank humans by supposed purity. Teachers warn students to avoid Jewish influence. At home, families gather around the radio each evening, listening to Hitler's speeches broadcast nationwide. Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, makes sure there's no escape. Newspapers, films, posters, songs, all whisper the same message. Hitler is Germany. Germany is Hitler. Even leisure becomes political. You see massive parades, sports events, the Hitler youth camps, young boys in uniforms marching through forests, singing patriotic songs. They learn discipline, obedience, and hatred before they even understand what those words mean. The League of German Girls trains the young women to become future mothers of pure Aryan children. The Nazi dream of a racially perfect nation seeps into every home. And then the persecution begins to turn from words to laws. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws are passed. Jews are stripped of citizenship, banned from marrying or even having relationships with non-Jews. They can't teach, hold public jobs, or fly the German flag. Suddenly, people you once shared streets and shops with are treated like ghosts. You see Jewish doctors losing their clinics, professors being fired, families packing what they can carry as neighbors pretend not to notice. Scholars still argue whether the world could have stopped it then, before it became irreversible. But the truth is most people chose silence. Fear, pride, and comfort became stronger than conscience. You walk through the streets at night and notice the silence. No laughter, no music, just footsteps and the occasional echo of boots from the Gestapo. The secret police can appear anywhere, anytime. A whisper, a rumor, a careless word, and someone vanishes. Germany begins to feel less like a country and more like a stage with one actor playing every role. And Hitler's performance continues, grander, darker, more dangerous. He builds monuments, highways, and armies. Factories roar back to life, churning out tanks, planes, and weapons disguised as industrial projects. Unemployment drops to almost nothing. The people cheer. They believe he's saving the nation. But behind the miracle is madness. In 1936, Hitler marches troops into the Rhineland, a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. France and Britain protest, but do nothing. Hitler watches their hesitation and smiles. You can sense it, he's testing the world, pushing the limits inch by inch. At the same time, the 1936 Berlin Olympics begin, a masterstroke of propaganda. Germany looks peaceful, modern, magnificent. The swastika flies beside the Olympic rings, and the world claps politely, pretending not to notice the camps being built behind the forests. Foreign journalists write about the order and pride of the new Germany. Tourists come home with souvenirs, and no idea what they've just witnessed. But you see it. Behind the gleaming stadiums, the SS grows stronger under Heinrich Himmler, a man obsessed with purity and control. The first concentration camps like Dachau are already functioning, not yet death factories but places to break those who dare to resist. Step by step, Hitler's vision begins to solidify, a single-party state, total obedience and racial hierarchy at its core. And as you move through this new Germany, you can feel the walls closing in. Art becomes propaganda. Science becomes eugenics. Even religion bends under pressure. Everywhere posters scream the same message. One people, one empire, one Führer. The irony? Many believe it. You hear the chants grow louder each day, echoing through cities and villages, blending pride with blindness. And in that growing roar of devotion, one question quietly fades away, the question of right and wrong. You look up at a banner stretched across a street and for the first time, you realize something chilling. Hitler didn't just take control of Germany. You stand on the edge of 1937, and the air feels heavy, like thunder waiting to break. Hitler's empire is thriving, at least on the surface. The economy looks strong, the streets are busy again, and the people, most of them, believe they're living in a miracle. But behind the parades and posters, something darker brews. Hitler isn't satisfied with Germany's rebirth. He wants revenge, expansion, and destiny. He speaks openly of a greater Germany, one that stretches across Europe. The word he uses again and again is Lebensraum, living space. You hear it in his speeches, shouted to roaring crowds. The German people need room to grow. Our destiny lies in the east. The audience cheers, but you feel the chill beneath the words. Because living space doesn't mean land, it means conquest. It means someone else's home becoming yours. By now, Hitler has rebuilt his army far beyond what the Treaty of Versailles allowed. He's training pilots in secret, building tanks disguised as tractors, turning factories into weapon foundries. The world knows, and watches, but does nothing. You can almost hear the ticking of a clock no one wants to face. Then in March 1938 he makes his first move. You stand at the border of Austria, and you see German troops crossing with flowers in their rifles. Crowds cheer, women throw bouquets, bands play the national anthem. It looks like a celebration, not an invasion. But it's both. The Anschluss, the annexation of Austria, happens without a single shot fired. Hitler calls it a reunion of brothers, the uniting of all German-speaking people. The world protests, but again, no one acts. For Hitler, it's intoxicating. He's tested the West twice and found it weak. You follow him next to Czechoslovakia. He demands the Sudetenland, a region with ethnic Germans, claiming they're being mistreated. Britain's Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, flies to meet him, desperate to avoid another war. The meetings stretch for days. Photographs show polite handshakes, forced smiles, and a frail old man trying to reason with a fanatic. Finally, in September 1938, the Munich Agreement is signed. Chamberlain returns to London waving the paper, declaring, "Peace for our time." You can almost hear the irony echo across history. Because that peace lasts less than a year. Hitler, of course, takes all of Czechoslovakia by March 1939. There's no mercy, no hesitation, only momentum. His appetite has grown. And now his gaze fixes on the next target, Poland. He wants it for resources, land, and strategic power, but also for ideology. To him, the Slavs are inferior, and Poland is part of the living space Germany deserves. But this time Britain and France draw a line. They warn, if you invade Poland there will be war. Hitler doesn't believe them. He thinks they'll fold again like before. Meanwhile, he makes a shocking move, a secret deal with his supposed enemy Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, signed in August 1939, stuns the world. Publicly, it's a non-aggression treaty. Secretly, it divides Eastern Europe into Nazi and Soviet zones. You can almost see the map being carved in ink, Poland split down the middle. Then, on September 1, 1939, at dawn, the silence breaks. You hear the rumble of tanks, the whistle of dive bombers, the thunder of artillery. The Wehrmacht invades Poland. Within days, cities crumble, civilians flee, and the sky fills with black smoke. German troops move with brutal precision, a new kind of warfare the world hasn't seen before. Blitzkrieg. Lightning war. Fast, ruthless, overwhelming. 2 days later, Britain and France declare war on Germany. The world's nightmare begins again. Hitler stands before the Reichstag, calm, confident, almost smug. He tells his people Germany was forced into this war. And the crowd roars with approval. But as you walk through the streets, you see something else. Fear behind the flags, silence behind the smiles. The war machine is moving and it can't be stopped. Over the next few months, you watch Poland collapse. The Soviet Union invades from the east, just as the secret pact promised. By October, Poland is gone, divided between two predators. Hitler celebrates the victory. But it's just the beginning. He turns west, to France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, planning lightning wars that will shock the world. And as he gazes across the map of Europe, one thing becomes clear. The man who once sat in a prison cell, scribbling angry words about destiny, now controls half a continent. But beneath the triumph, something sinister is growing, something far darker than conquest. Because while the world prepares for war inside Germany, the machinery of genocide is already humming to life. You open your eyes to a world on fire. It's 1940, and the Nazi war machine is unstoppable. Cities fall like dominoes: Warsaw, Oslo, Copenhagen, Brussels, Paris. Each invasion faster than the last. You follow the German columns as they roar through Europe, tanks grinding down cobblestone streets, soldiers raising the swastika over captured capitals. Everywhere they go, the same ritual: speeches, parades, promises of liberation. But behind the flags and brass bands you sense the fear. Hitler calls it a new European order. To everyone else, it's a nightmare unfolding in real time. France collapses in just 6 weeks. Britain stands alone. Across the English Channel, you can almost hear Winston Churchill's voice: "We shall never surrender." Hitler orders his air force, the Luftwaffe, to crush the island into submission. You stand in London during the Blitz, watching the night sky glow red as bombs rain down. Firestorms devour streets, cathedrals, homes. Children huddle in underground stations, clutching gas masks like toys. And yet, Britain doesn't break. For the first time, Hitler faces resistance he can't defeat. The Battle of Britain becomes his first major failure. His air raids kill thousands, but the island refuses to fall. You can almost feel the frustration radiating from Berlin. But Hitler never stops. He turns his attention east toward the land he's obsessed with, Russia. It's 1941 and he makes the most disastrous decision of his life: Operation Barbarossa. June 22nd, the largest invasion in history begins. 3 million German soldiers storm into the Soviet Union. At first, the victories are spectacular. Cities fall one after another: Minsk, Smolensk, Kiev. Millions of Soviet soldiers are captured or killed. The Nazis believe the war will be over by winter. But winter is coming. You watch them march into the endless white. Snow swallows tanks, oil freezes in engines, men die standing from the cold. Supplies run out. Horses collapse in the snow. The Wehrmacht, once unstoppable, begins to slow, stumble, starve. And in the east, the brutality reaches unimaginable levels. Behind the front lines, special Nazi death squads, the Einsatzgruppen, follow the army. Their mission isn't battle, it's extermination. You see them rounding up Jewish families, forcing them to dig trenches, and then, the gunfire. Entire villages erased. By the end of 1941, over 1 million Jews have been murdered this way, not in camps but in fields and forests. You hear Hitler speak of it privately as the final solution. That phrase will soon become synonymous with the darkest chapter in human history. As the war drags on, the killing becomes industrial. Trains begin carrying people to places with names you'll never forget: Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Chelmno. At first, the Nazis claim they're resettling the Jews. But inside, you see the truth: gas chambers disguised as showers, crematoria burning day and night, mountains of shoes, glasses, and hair. Even some German officers are horrified. But no one dares to stop it. The Holocaust has begun. Back in Germany, life feels strangely normal for many. The propaganda machine works overtime, showing victories, hiding defeats, and portraying Hitler as a near-divine figure. In the streets, children still march, factories hum, couples dance. Most people don't ask questions, and those who do disappear. By 1942, Hitler controls most of Europe. His empire stretches from the Atlantic to the outskirts of Moscow. He's built what he once dreamed of in Mein Kampf, a continental order under one rule, one race, one Führer. But it's built on death, and you can sense the cracks beginning to form. In North Africa, German forces face fierce resistance from the Allies. In the east, the Soviets refuse to collapse. And in the skies above Germany, British and American bombers begin to strike back. Cities like Hamburg, Cologne, and Dresden burn in waves of fire, the same flames Hitler once unleashed on others now falling on his own people. Yet even as defeat inches closer, Hitler refuses to accept reality. He retreats deeper into obsession, convinced that fate itself has chosen him. Scholars still argue what drove him at this point: delusion, madness, or pure fanaticism. But one thing is clear: he'd rather see Germany destroyed than surrender. You walk through the war-torn streets and feel the exhaustion everywhere. The cheering crowds are gone. The music has stopped. Even the propaganda posters seem to fade under the dust of bombed-out walls. The world that once seemed unstoppable is beginning to crumble. But Hitler? He can't see it. He won't see it. Because to him this isn't the end, it's the test of destiny. And in that blind faith millions more will die. It's 1943, and the world that once knelt before Hitler is now turning against him. The myth of invincibility is gone. The defeat at Stalingrad shatters everything. 4 months, his Sixth Army had fought in the frozen ruins of that city, street by street, house by house, starving, freezing, dying. When they finally surrender, nearly 300,000 German soldiers vanish into Soviet captivity. It's the first time Hitler's armies are completely destroyed. He refuses to believe it. He even promotes the general responsible. In his mind, admitting defeat would be admitting weakness, and weakness was unthinkable. But reality doesn't care. The Allies push from the west. The Soviets push from the east. The walls of the Reich begin to close in. Inside Germany, the people no longer cheer. They whisper. They hide. They starve. Bombs fall almost every night now. The ground shakes, glass rains down, whole cities turn to ash. And in the middle of this collapsing empire, Hitler grows smaller. He stops appearing in public. His health is failing. His hands tremble, his eyes dart with paranoia. He blames everyone, his generals, his allies, even his own people. By 1944, the unthinkable happens. His own officers try to kill him. The July 20th plot. A bomb explodes inside his headquarters, Wolf's Lair. Walls collapse. Smoke fills the room. 4 people die, but Hitler survives, shielded by a heavy wooden table. He emerges, dazed but alive, his clothes shredded, hair singed. And in his mind, it's not luck, it's destiny. He becomes more ruthless than ever. Thousands are executed. The conspirators are hung with piano wire, slow, cruel deaths filmed for his amusement. The message is clear. Defy the Führer and you'll die screaming. But even destiny can't stop the inevitable. By 1945, Soviet troops are less than 100 kilometers from Berlin. The city is already a graveyard. Broken buildings, starving civilians, the echo of artillery in every direction. And Hitler? He's moved underground. You follow him down the narrow steps into the Führer bunker, deep beneath the ruins of Berlin. It's small, damp, and claustrophobic, a tomb made of concrete. Upstairs, the empire burns. Down here, Hitler gives orders to armies that no longer exist. He speaks of miracle weapons, imaginary divisions, and fantasies of victory. Those around him nod even though they know it's over. On April 20, 1945, he celebrates his 56th birthday underground. The Soviets are only blocks away. Outside, Berlin burns like a dying star. He marries his longtime companion Eva Braun in a small ceremony. She wears black. They toast champagne. They sign papers. And then, together, they make their final decision. On April 30th, Hitler says goodbye to his staff. He walks into his private study with Eva. Moments later, a single gunshot echoes through the bunker. Guards rush in. Hitler is dead. Eva has taken poison. The bodies are carried outside, doused in petrol, and set on fire in the garden of the Reich Chancellery. The dictator who dreamed of a 1,000-year empire lasted barely 12. Above ground, Berlin surrenders. Within a week, Germany capitulates. The war in Europe is over. But the cost? Over 70 million dead. Cities wiped off maps. Families erased. Entire nations scarred for generations. And the man who promised glory left behind only ashes. You walk through modern Berlin now. Tourists take pictures near the bunker site. A plain parking lot with no grand statue, no marker of triumph. Just silence. That's all that remains of Adolf Hitler. A reminder that power built on hate eventually consumes itself. Those who cannot remember the past, a voice whispers, are condemned to repeat it. And as the night settles in, you realize, this story wasn't about one man. It was about how easily millions can follow one. How a single voice, fed by anger, can echo louder than truth, until the truth finally fights back. So, if you're still here listening to the silence after the storm, remember, history doesn't repeat itself, people do. Good night. You stand in the ruins of Berlin. It's May 1945. The air smells of smoke, concrete dust, and something heavier, the weight of millions of dead dreams. The radio crackles. A voice, trembling, declares what everyone already knows. The Führer is dead. For 12 years, his shadow stretched across Europe. Now, in a single sentence, it vanishes. But his death doesn't end the suffering. It begins the reckoning. Across Germany, chaos reigns. Civilians wander roads lined with rubble, looking for food, for family, for any sign of home. The Allied forces, Americans from the west, Soviets from the east, British from the north, flood into what's left of the Reich. There's no more Reich now. Just a shattered country carved into zones. Every street corner carries the echo of something that once claimed to be eternal. In the ruins of concentration camps, soldiers find what words can't describe: piles of shoes, mountains of hair, gold teeth, skeletal survivors staring with hollow eyes. It's here that the true face of the Nazi dream is finally seen. You pause and realize that for years most Germans never really saw this horror. They believed the speeches, the flags, the promises. Now they see the cost. Germany becomes a country without a leader, without direction, without pride. Millions of soldiers are prisoners. Cities like Dresden, Hamburg, and Cologne are flattened, not just destroyed but erased. In these first months after Hitler's death, life feels suspended between guilt and survival. And then comes justice, or at least an attempt at it. In November 1945, the Nuremberg trials begin. 22 surviving Nazi leaders stand before an international court, accused of crimes humanity had never formally defined before. Crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The world watches. For the first time in history, nations unite not to wage war, but to hold the powerful accountable. One by one, the evidence unfolds. Documents signed in elegant handwriting that ordered exterminations, testimonies from camp survivors, films showing what the world was never meant to see. Some defendants plead ignorance. Some show defiance. A few, like Hermann Göring, remain unrepentant until the end. But justice comes. 12 are sentenced to death, others to prison. Göring cheats the noose by swallowing poison the night before his execution. As the verdicts are read, the world holds its breath. This isn't just about punishment, it's about proof that civilization still exists after barbarity. Outside the courtroom, Germany begins to split. The Allies divided into East and West, sowing the seeds of a new global conflict, the Cold War. And among the ruins, children play with helmets and shell casings, too young to understand that the ground beneath them once trembled with speeches that promised forever. In the quiet that follows, you can almost hear it. The sigh of a nation waking from a nightmare, unsure if it's ready to face daylight. History books will call this the end. But for the people living it, feels like a punishment that never ends. Because when the dictator dies, his echo lingers, in grief, in guilt, in every ruined street. And you realize, the story of Hitler didn't end in that bunker. It lives on in the scars of those who survived him. The guns are silent, but the world is far from quiet. It's 1945, and the war that started with Hitler's roar has left every continent gasping. You can almost hear it, the hum of relief, the cry of grief, and somewhere beneath it all, a slow rebuilding heartbeat. Europe looks like a broken chessboard. Cities that once glowed with art, music, and life are nothing but skeletons of stone. Warsaw, gone. London, scarred. Paris, barely breathing. And Berlin, the ghost city, its empire reduced to rubble and rats. The world has won, but no one feels victorious. Millions wander with no home, no papers, no country. They're called displaced persons. Jews liberated from camps, orphans clutching photos, women searching train stations for husbands who'll never return. And among them are soldiers who don't know how to stop fighting. In the ashes of the Third Reich, the Allies begin something new, a promise that such horror will never happen again. The United Nations is born in 1945. 50 countries come together, signing a charter that speaks not of conquest but of peace. Yet behind those smiles in San Francisco, another storm is brewing. The Cold War. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, now occupies Eastern Europe. The United States stands tall in the West. They were allies once, but as soon as Hitler's body burned, trust went up in smoke with it. Berlin, divided. Germany split. The world, now watching two superpowers eye each other like predators circling in fog. You can feel the tension rise again, The same kind of fear that once fed fascism, only this time, it wears a different flag. And in Asia, a new horror unfolds. The United States drops atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 1945. Two flashes of light that erase over 100,000 lives in seconds. Humanity has learned how to destroy itself even faster than before. In the years that follow, the Marshall Plan rebuilds Western Europe. Factories rise from the dust. Families rebuild homes. Jazz music returns to Paris cafes. But behind every laugh, there's a silence. A name missing from dinner tables, a shadow in every photograph. You can almost sense it, the guilt of survival. And then, something powerful begins. The world starts remembering. Writers, artists, filmmakers, and survivors begin to tell what happened in the camps. The word Holocaust becomes part of human language, a symbol not just of Jewish suffering, but of what hate can do when left unchecked. Trials continue. New nations are born. Old empires fade. In 1948, a fragile state rises in the Middle East, Israel, a homeland for a people who had nearly been erased. And though the world says never again, the fear remains. Could it happen somewhere else? Scholars still argue whether Hitler's war truly ended in 1945, or if its lessons are still unfolding. Because every nation touched by that darkness keeps a scar, a reminder that power, once worshipped, can destroy its own altar. You look around now, the rebuilt cities, the smiling faces, the modern lights, and realize, this peace was paid for in blood. And if you listen closely, the world still whispers the same quiet prayer it did that spring in 1945. Please, never again. You've seen the bombs, the battles, the blood, but none of it began with armies. It began inside one man's mind. And tonight you step into it. It's strange in here, not chaos but control. Everything in Hitler's world is ordered, neat, symbolic. The swastika, for instance, he didn't invent it, he stole it. An ancient Hindu symbol twisted into a weapon of identity. Even that tells you something. He didn't create power, he repackaged it. In the 1920s and early 30s, Germany wanted a savior. Hitler wanted a stage. The match was inevitable. You imagine him rehearsing, the gestures, the pauses, the rage. Every movement choreographed, every word designed to pull emotion like a string. It wasn't politics. It was theater. Behind the microphone, he studied his own voice like a composer. The rise, the silence, the sudden shout, all to hypnotize crowds hungry for meaning. And it worked. People cried. They fainted. They screamed his name as if salvation had a face. But away from the stage, he was nothing like the legend. Friends from his early Vienna days remembered a quiet, isolated drifter, obsessed with architecture, sketching buildings he could never afford to enter. He read obsessively, mostly propaganda and pseudoscience. He hated modern art, calling it degenerate, even though his own paintings looked like postcards. Psychologists later called it a paradox. A man with no empathy, yet gifted at manipulating emotions. Scholars still argue, as they love to say, whether Hitler truly believed his own ideology, or whether it was just the perfect lie that made him powerful. Either way, he became the lie. He believed destiny had chosen him. He often spoke about providence, about surviving the trenches in World War I as a divine sign. And when Germany finally knelt at Versailles, he decided he was the one chosen to lift it back up, no matter the cost. His myth grew because it was needed. Joseph Goebbels, his propaganda minister, made sure of that. Posters showed Hitler surrounded by light, photographed from below to make him look taller, stronger, godlike. Children learned his name before they learned to write. Textbooks said he was Germany's greatest son. He became both father and phantom. But myths demand worship, and worship needs enemies. So he gave them one. The Jews, the communists, the traitors within. Every speech fed on fear until hatred became national identity. You can almost see it, the rallies, oceans of red flags under searchlights, music pounding like a heartbeat. It looked like unity. It felt like belonging. But really it was hypnosis. People weren't thinking, they were feeling. And feelings, when guided by fear, can build monsters. Inside his private life, the mask slipped. He was a vegetarian, a non-smoker, polite to his staff. But he had no close friends, no true warmth. Eva Braun was more companion than partner, existing in the shadows. He distrusted everyone, even his most loyal followers. By 1945, that paranoia had consumed him. He ranted about betrayal, accused entire divisions of cowardice, fired generals for imaginary conspiracies. The savior had turned into the prisoner of his own myth. And that's the cruelest truth. Hitler didn't just destroy the world around him, He destroyed himself trying to become the god he pretended to be. You stand now among the ruins of his image, the posters, the statues, the recordings, and realize they all served one purpose: to hide how small he truly was. The myth was massive. The man was hollow. And somewhere deep down, that's the scariest part, because it means anyone given the right crowd, the right story, and the right lie could wear the same mask. You step into silence. Not the silence of peace, the kind that hums in empty rooms where millions once lived, loved, and disappeared. It's the mid-1940s and Allied soldiers are opening the gates of places with names that will never be forgotten: Auschwitz, Dachau, Treblinka, Bergen-Belsen. Behind those gates, the world finally sees what Hitler's new order really meant. Rows of barracks filled with skeletal survivors. Piles of human ashes in ovens still warm. Shoes, suitcases, toys, reminders that these weren't numbers but people. The Nazis called it the final solution. But the truth was genocide, an industrialized murder machine designed to erase an entire people. 6 million Jews. Hundreds of thousands of Roma, disabled individuals, political prisoners, and anyone who dared to resist. Men, women, children, entire families swallowed by smoke. For years, many Germans had whispered about trains that never came back, about factories that didn't make goods but used people as fuel. But no one imagined this scale. Even the liberators, hardened soldiers, broke down crying when they saw it. You walk through the remains now decades later. The smell of death is gone, but the air still feels heavy. Walls still whisper. And the ground remembers. In the years after the war, the world begins to put words to the unspeakable. The term Holocaust takes root, from the Greek holocauston, meaning completely burned. It's not just history. It's warning. Writers like Elie Wiesel, Primo Levi, and Anne Frank, through her fragile diary, give voice to the voiceless. Their words remind the world that evil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes, it wears uniforms and smiles. Memorials rise. The Yad Vashem in Israel. The memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe in Berlin. Camps preserved as museums, not to glorify pain, but to make sure silence never wins again. And yet, there's something haunting in remembrance itself. Because remembering hurts. It demands you face not just the monsters who acted, but the millions who watched and did nothing. Scholars still argue what made ordinary people turn away: fear, ignorance, or belief. Maybe all three. Maybe that's what makes the Holocaust more terrifying than any war. It showed how easy it is to destroy humanity when compassion is called weakness. But from the ashes came something unbreakable. Survivors built new lives, new families, and new nations. They taught their children that remembering is a form of resistance. And Germany, the nation once blinded by its own myth, began a long, painful journey of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, coming to terms with the past. Monuments of shame became lessons of strength. Because forgetting, they realized, would be the final victory for Hitler. Every generation since then faces the same question. How do you carry memory without letting it crush you? The answer maybe lies in how softly you speak when you visit these places. You whisper not out of fear, but out of respect. For the voices that can't speak anymore. For the ghosts who still listen. You leave the memorial with a strange stillness. You know you've just looked into the darkest place humanity has ever gone, and somehow the world found a way to keep living after it. That, perhaps, is our greatest rebellion against him. That life, imperfect, fragile, beautiful, continues. The story of Hitler doesn't end in a bunker. And it doesn't end with his death. It lingers, in every speech that twists truth into fear. In every leader who rises by dividing. In every crowd that forgets to ask why. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. And if we don't listen to the rhyme, we start dancing to the same tune again. You look around the modern world. Nations torn by propaganda. People shouting instead of listening. Truth bending under the weight of emotion. It's easy to think, this can't happen again. But that's exactly what they said in 1933. Hitler's rise wasn't magic. It was method. He exploited pain, fear, and pride. He promised simple answers to complex problems. And the people, tired of chaos, believed him. That's the oldest trick in the book. Turn despair into devotion. Today the tools are different. Back then it was radio, newspapers, rallies. Now it's algorithms, hashtags, and viral lies. But the psychology is the same. A lie told often enough still finds believers. What makes Hitler's story terrifying isn't how one man fooled a nation. It's how a nation wanted to be fooled. Because hate, dressed as hope, is easier to follow than truth, which demands courage. In classrooms, historians teach his name as a warning, not a legend. In memorials, his image is absent, Not to erase him, but to deny him the fame he craved. And yet, the shadow remains. Not to glorify, but to remind. The Holocaust museums, the documentaries, the fading voices of survivors, they all whisper the same plea. Remember us, not him. Because memory is the antidote to manipulation. The moment you forget, someone else is waiting to rewrite the story. When you listen to the rise of Hitler, you're not just hearing about Germany, you're hearing about us, about what humans are capable of. When fear replaces empathy, and obedience replaces thought. That's why we tell this story. Not to keep the horror alive, but to keep awareness awake. Every time a politician blames outsiders, every time propaganda spreads faster than truth, every time silence becomes safer than speaking, that's when the ghost of Hitler breathes again. Not in person, but in principle. But there's another truth, a brighter one. For every person who followed him, there were others who fought back, who hid families, who resisted in secret, who refused to give up their humanity. They prove that even in the darkest times, there's always light. Small, stubborn, defiant. The story of Hitler's rise to power isn't just about one man's evil. It's about the world's responsibility. Because dictators don't rise alone. They rise when good people stop paying attention. So maybe the lesson isn't about him at all. Maybe it's about us. The listeners, the readers, the survivors. The ones still shaping tomorrow. Because every generation has its test. And history's greatest warning is that evil doesn't need to win elections. It just needs apathy to win silence. And that was the complete story of Adolf Hitler's rise to power. From a failed artist to a symbol of destruction. If you made it this far, you've carried the weight of history with me. Don't forget to share this story, not for views, but because remembering is resistance. I'm your host from Nighttime Tales/Ancient Dreams, and this was history that should never be forgotten. Until next time, keep questioning, keep remembering, and never stop seeking truth. The fire is gone now. Berlin sleeps under a blanket of fog. No speeches, no soldiers, no flags waving in the night air, just the hum of traffic, faint and distant, like the heartbeat of a city that has learned to live again. You sit there for a moment, still hearing echoes of marching boots, the chants, the fear, the blind loyalty. It's strange how silence can feel louder after a story like this. History always leaves behind whispers. In books, in ruins, in the spaces where walls once carried orders. But tonight they fade. All that remains is the soft breath of wind through memory. You wonder, quietly, how something like this ever became possible. How millions followed, how reason drowned beneath noise. And maybe that's the lesson, that evil doesn't arrive shouting. It slips in quietly, disguised as hope. Scholars still argue over what made Hitler's rise inevitable. Was it the economy, the humiliation, or the madness of one man amplified by fear? But you right now don't need an answer. You felt it. You've seen how fragile humanity can be. So take a slow breath. Let the noise fade out. And if you've made it all the way here, through every rise, every rally, every ruin, thank you for walking through history with me tonight. Before you drift off, remember to like the video, subscribe if you truly enjoy these quiet journeys, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from right now? Now close your eyes. The past has ended. The night is calm. Sweet dreams.